Hello everyone, and welcome back to SFF180. On tonight's installment of the 12 Days of Halloween 2017, I look at two recent horror novellas from the illustrious Tor.com publishing line, Stephen Graham Jones' Mapping the Interior, and Tade Thompson's The Murders of Molly Southbourne. Thomas here, your host as always. Thank you all for joining me. So, there are some people out there who just don't do horror fiction, and I get that. I think for many people, what keeps them away from horror isn't just the superficial stuff, blood and gore and jump scares, but the simple fact that horror is a genre whose express artistic goal is to be transgressive. Sure, there can be fun horror and cheesy horror, but when the genre decides to get serious, that's when it takes an unflinching look at the heart of human darkness, peeling back the mask of civility and normalcy to peer directly into the face of the demon lurking underneath. It's often argued that horror fiction has a hard time keeping up with real life, and often becomes redundant altogether, because the world around us always seems to be out-eviling anything a storyteller can come up with. So, serious horror often turns inward, using whatever tropes it employs to represent how what should be a normal happy life can come completely undone. Now naturally, the stories that result are often unrelievedly grim. Tor.com Publishing, with its award-sweeping novella line, has been dipping into horror in a big way, allowing, as per its usual policy, a diverse array of talent as free a hand as possible to tell any kind of story they feel compelled to tell. Now, I'm going to review two of these recent books right now. As you'll see, these authors are emphatically not here to give you a fun time. Neil Gaiman has described popular horror fiction as a ghost train ride. You get on the ghost train, it hurtles through the scary darkness, things are hard, but at the end, the train reliably pulls back into the station, the lights are bright, and you get off safe and sound, everything's fine, it was only a story. But with these two books, the train doesn't stop, and no one gets off. Tade Thompson's The Murders of Molly Southbourne is a bone-crunching, violent allegory about growing up without a firm sense of identity, and its young heroine is very literally at war with herself. We first meet Molly as a small child with a curious problem. If she bleeds, for any reason, even just a little bit, it causes a clone of herself to instantiate. The first time it happens, the extra Molly is a new friend and playmate for the lonely little homeschooled girl living on a farm who's never allowed trips into the city. But in a very short time, the new Molly changes, like that, attacking the original in an animal rage. Molly is given strict rules about how to deal with the new Mollys by her parents, who have a backstory of their own she soon learns much more about, and she becomes a highly efficient killer by her early teens. But as she gets older, and even attempts life away from the farm at college, the attacks become more frequent, more violent. How can anyone live like this? Growing up, Molly becomes, on the one hand, understandably standoffish and not given to emotional closeness, though on the other, she's happy to take on a sexual partner as a way of scratching those itches. And she does eventually bond with a physiology professor who has asked her to help with his gross anatomy research, and who becomes the first person outside her family with whom she shares her dark secret. But ultimately, Molly's in a this-can't-go-on situation, and everything must come to a head. Tade Thompson's story can be thought of as a black comedy variant of Frankenstein, with Molly an unwitting victor. She's creating new life without meaning to, certainly without wanting to. And the psychological toll of having to live as she has done, where violent death is an unavoidable, almost daily survival necessity, makes Molly's efforts to escape her sense of personal isolation feel heroic like nothing else. Driven by circumstances outside her control, into a life that can never be, even for a moment, normal, in ways everyone else takes for granted, Molly's story is a tragedy that Thompson never once sugarcoats. She begins to wonder if she is even the real Molly herself after a while. Intense, dark, and without any comforting roadmaps for its heroine out of the cycle of hopelessness that she's trapped in, The Murders of Molly Southbourne will tie your stomach in knots and leave you feeling unsettled for days. Even more despairing and grimdark is Mapping the Interior by Native American author Stephen Graham Jones, the story of a young Blackfoot boy named Junior who has moved away from the reservation with his mother and special needs little brother Dino, following the death of his father, who was Pretty much a no account that neither of the boys really knew. One night, while sleepwalking, Junior encounters his dad's ghost, walking through their little house, dressed in full traditional Blackfoot regalia, which his dad never wore when alive, and what Junior calls a fancy dancer outfit. Determined to prove to himself that the vision was real, Junior undertakes an impressively scientific approach to the problem, diagramming the interior of the house to record where and when encounters take place, and seeking to gather whatever physical proof of the manifestations he can. Now, it soon becomes evident that what's going on isn't just in Junior's head, and that his father's return may be anything but protective and benevolent. The story is written in Junior's voice, which, once you get used to it, feels so real it's a bit unsettling. Junior is wrestling with any number of confused and agonizing emotions: his need to know his father, his discomfort at the idea of his mom taking a new boyfriend, his protectiveness towards his little brother who has seizures and is heartlessly bullied, and a whole host of conflicted feelings about his own native heritage and the roles and expectations of living that post-colonized life. It's a gripping and powerfully heartfelt novella, but it's also ultimately so bleak, especially in an ending that suggests certain cycles of tragedy cannot be avoided or escaped, that even readers who admire it will have a hard time saying they enjoyed the experience. There are simply generations of pain poured out into the pages of this tale, ghosts of millions of tragic pasts that never seem to find any rest. And that's all I have for this episode of SFF180. I want to thank all of you for joining me. Remember, the most important thing: these are reviews. You will not always agree with me, but if you enjoyed watching, please hit that like button, share the video far and wide with all of your SFF reading friends, and above all, please subscribe. If you haven't done so, that is how SFF180 grows. You can also support the channel at my TeePublic store and at my Patreon, where recruits into Wink's Army get little perks like getting to see the videos early and stuff like that. So I want to thank all those people for being awesome supporters, just like I want to thank you guys for being lovely viewers. And remember, I will see you again tomorrow night at midnight for the next installment of the 12 Days of Halloween.